Okay, so we saw that there is a bunch of different elements that we can use, and then now let's start to try to get them to use them. So here is an example I have. There are some listings in here for Airbnb from 2023. I wonder actually if this link still works. Oh, interesting. So we can use this JSON. No, that's better. So let's actually do that. So what I'm going to do here in WebDev Scratch, I'm going to call it Airbnb 2 because you saw the one I was using preparing for this. Let me close VS Code in there. Oh, and before I go into that, and you can see I have Claude opening here. So let's do a little bit of AI, how we can use AI for web development. So my recommendation, I don't know if you saw, but in a glimpse in the one of the previous videos, I disabled GitHub Copilot, which is going to be kind of like the coding agent that you can use from GitHub. Is one of the best ways of using generative AI for coding. I'm going to be trying to talk a little bit about that. I have been experimenting a lot with those things, and it's one of the best ways of doing that, at least for free, especially if you're a student. But then the other way you can do things is just asking chatbots. So my recommendation is that when you're starting to learn, sadly, even though I have done a lot of explorations on those, you still cannot use generative AI and vibe coding and things like that for replacing like the full HTML or web development or full stack development process, because you still need to understand what code it is generating and what does that code mean. Okay, so in that sense, I'm going to try to give you some hints on some ways that you can use generative AI to help you in your process. But I strongly recommend you to try to disable it, at least for certain parts, because it is very tempting to have it just autocomplete and create like the whole page and things like that, but then you are not going to be learning. So if you want to talk more about that, I might do another video, but for the moment, let me show you an example of something productive that you can do. So the whole idea is that we have these listings from the San Francisco Airbnb data. If you search for that, let's say Airbnb San Francisco data, something like that. The good folks at Airbnb had this project called Inside Airbnb. They changed it recently, so they actually added this nice dashboard that contains all of this information. And it's really funny because if you know about San Francisco, there is a ton of listings here in the Tenderloin, which is in, actually it's not even in the Tenderloin. It's in Union Square, and this is probably like around, it's not even Chinatown. Oh, I wonder why there are so many in there. In any case, when I see that I only want to see full listings, there is a lot of those that get removed, and there is also this other option in here, which I really like. So I am guessing, so this one says that they have to be places that are recent or frequently booked. So it seemed to me that it might be scammers or something in there. I don't know. But in any case, this dashboard is interesting, but what we are looking for is here to get the data. We want to get the original data, and then you can search for San Francisco or Oakland or Boston or whatever your favorite city is, and you can download it in there. The data I'm providing, it's in JSON format, so I'm actually going to use this one, although here you can also open it as a CSV, comma separated file, and it's kind of very convenient because you can open it in Excel, okay? In any case, the idea is we have that data, so you can go and download that data. I did mention that we have that here in the slides, so here is the data, I already downloaded, and then I can come here to Finder, and then let's try here on my desktop, list, and then da, and then you have that zip file, I can unzip it, and then I have this thing. Again, as I say, let's open it from here. So I can just open Visual Studio Code, and then I tell it that I want to open a folder, and then I want to open this one, and then I go there. Okay, that's one way. My favorite way of doing it, it's using the terminal. So let me this time, instead of doing terminal from scratch and then navigating into that, I can also right click in here and then say new terminal at folder. If you're using something like Windows, it's going to be similar, but just because like Mac OS has become kind of like the most wide standard, at least here in Silicon Valley for software development. I'm going to be showing things mostly in Mac OS. But if you have any specific issues on Windows, do let us know, especially on the Slack. Maybe someone else has the same issue and they can help you with it. In any case, if I use the pwd command to the current working folder, then it tells me that I'm in the correct one. And then since I have Visual Studio Code installed like that, then I can just run Visual Studio Code in that and then just run. Let me make sure I close this, which was my previous HTTP server. And then that's another reason why I prefer having external terminals, because that way I don't forget when I have commands running. And then you can just try opening this file here. So when you do that, this is going to be in a JSON format, and you can see that it's quite big. And somebody was asking me about different extensions for VS Code. So it seems I actually don't have that one installed in here. So let me go and search for JSON Prettified. I think it's easy. I think it's this one. Let me go and try with that one. Usually when you're installing extensions on VS Code, by the way, you go that in here in this icon. I just want something that lets me organize that JSON file. Don't recall if it was this one. I don't like that this one doesn't have that many, like that good of a rating. So I'm probably not going with that one. I think it might have been this other one in here. Let me go and give it a try. Just run Command K to complete the command, type JSON to format the content. Yeah, that kind of works. Let's go and see. I wonder what this one does. So give me 1 second. Oh yes, it creates like this whole analysis, like the JSON tree and modify. Oh, I think the only one I want, like the basic one. So let me go with this one, the JSON formatted. So fingers crossed, I'm trusting the developer, and then they say just go in there and then just use format JSON. So when I do that and I open that in here, you can just go and say format JSON, Command Shift P, and then do this. Beautiful. So that's what I wanted to see. So basically, as you can see, the whole idea of this JSON file, it's basically a JavaScript format, and it's kind of like an object in JavaScript. If you have worked in Python, for instance, in the past, it's kind of like similar to a dictionary. And then what you can see in there, it's that it contains like multiple records for different listings in Airbnb. You can see that it has attributes and then the actual value, like this is the ID and this is the number. This is the listing URL and that's the URL. So hopefully if I go into this one, it actually gets me a nice place here in San Francisco. Okay, so once I have that, let's say that I want to create a page that starts showing these things. Okay, so let's say that the very first thing I want to do is this thing, just to show this title. So what I'm going to go is go back here. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it index.html. By the way, I didn't mention that before, but it is very important that you name it index.html. And I'm going to explain in a second why it is so important. Once you go in here, I'm going to start with my template. This is part of a package called Emmet, which with VS Code comes per like installed by default. I think with Sublime, I think you have to install it manually, but it's super convenient because you can just go in there and say autocomplete and make sure that VS Code Copilot doesn't bother me for the next 20 minutes or so. And then remember, I just write HTML5 and then I hit tab for autocomplete. Okay. Then I'm going to put in here San Francisco Airbnb data or listings or something like that. And then if I want to see this page, I go back to my terminal. I make sure that I am in the same folder, very important. And then I can run my HTTP server. Now, let me tell you another trick now. there is another HTTP server that you can use, which is a little bit more complex, called Reload. And it has a nice feature, which hopefully will work for us. What I'm going to tell it is that instead, and remember that I'm running -G, so it will be installed globally. And then if I just go and say, I want to do reload -v space dot, oh, I think maybe not even dot, just reload -v, then it is going to start an HTTP server in the current page. And then hopefully, if I do something like that, then you can see that it immediately gets refreshed on the right. What is the difference between that and the other one? And is that, by the way, once you have that running, if you want to finish the HTTP server, the only thing you have to do is just Control-C and saying cancel. You can see that in here, and that is going to stop the command. Okay, so let me compare that with running HTTP server. I'm going to be loading also localhost in the 8080 because it's probably going to be in there. That's interesting. So it seems that my Chrome is trying to update this multiple times. I wonder if it's because I have many other things open. So let me close the other ones, or like somehow I have something else that is querying this. And then if I go and I change these things, when I save, you can see that this doesn't change in here. So when you're running just a regular HTTP server, and this also explains a little bit on how the web works, every time you want to see the changes, you have to refresh the page. But it is not enough for you to just refresh the page. So everyone, please write this down. Whenever you're doing web development, make sure that you always do a hard refresh. So on Mac, that is going to be Command-Shift-R, okay? Command-Shift-R, and what the hard refresh does is that it kind of does the refresh or the reload, but then it deletes all the cache that it has, because the browser tries to keep a cache, so it will make things more like faster the next time you run stuff, okay? So keep that in mind. So what reload does is that it actually tries to do that refresh for you, which saves you some time, okay? Now, the other one thing I want you to write down, I already mentioned in the other video, is that always, every time you're doing web development, make sure to have the console open. You can open that in multiple ways. You just go here into the Chrome options. And by the way, you can also be using other browsers, and most of them are going to have these things, which are the developer tools. For the class, we are going to be using Chrome, the latest version of Chrome. So if, like everything we are going to be testing, needs to be working on Chrome. So make sure that you keep that in mind, even if you want to use another one. So keep these developer tools open, especially on the console, which is the one that is going to be listing any errors that you may have, okay? So once I have that, remember, if I come in here and then I change this and then say, for instance, made by John with love. So if you're just using the regular HTTP server, this is not going to refresh. I still have to come in here and then do Command-Shift-R. On Windows, I think it's Shift-F5 for you to just do that refresh, for you to see the changes. So always keep that in mind. If after making all of that, you still don't see the errors, go and check your HTTP server. Notice that every time I change things in here, let me add some noise in there so you can see the change. I want you to take a look at this when I go and do a Command-Shift-R in here. You can see that the log of the HTTP server, it's saying, oh, I got a request, a GET request, by the way, by Chrome to get this specific resource. And we are going to talk a little bit more about resources in a minute, okay? And I'm also trying to get like the icon, and I couldn't get the icon. And this is interesting. I actually haven't seen that specific one. But in any case, for the moment, you can see that it's refreshing. If things are not working and you still did the refresh, you did a hard refresh. So another trick that you can do, it's make sure that you stop the server and then you do a hard refresh. And then it should show something like this. It should show that it cannot load the page. And the reason is because you don't have an HTTP server. Sometimes it takes the browser, it takes you to, like the browser needs you to actually restart the server in order for it to clear completely the cache. So in this case, I'm going to do it with reload and then just open here the developer tools. I did it in this case with Command Option I, which you can also go and see here by this one, Command Option I, or if you forget all of that, just right click and say inspect, and that is going to take you into the elements and you just jump into the console. Okay, good. Let me stop in there for this video and then continue in the next one.